Hi, I'm John Hewitt. I've been working in technical documentation now for 30 years, most of that as a technical writer. I'm currently a content strategist for Quicken personal finance software. Today, I wanted to talk to you about the first time I got a technical writing job. I had been looking for work as a technical writer for a while. Up until 1993, I had been working as a lobbyist for medical causes and such. Unfortunately, the company I worked for laid me off, and I couldn't find and didn't want another job as a lobbyist. Technical writing, especially software documentation, seemed like a good fit for me. I had some pretty good computer skills for the time. I could use both Mac and PC equally well. I could code a little. I knew Microsoft Office and could build databases with FileMaker Pro. I was also, because of my lobbyist job, already quite skilled in online research at a time when most people thought the internet was America Online. I also had a degree in creative writing, and I had done some minor work as a reporter for a small-town newspaper. As part of my job as a lobbyist, I had done some work in writing bills and the occasional public relations piece. I had also had some freelance gigs, mainly doing proposals for companies trying to get into the internet game. This gave me the bare bones of a portfolio. Having a portfolio is important, as I talk about in my other video, How to Become a Technical Writer. I started applying for jobs everywhere. I live in Tucson, Arizona, but I was even applying for jobs in the Bay Area, back when it was merely expensive and not soul-crushingly expensive to live there. I did this using a little thing called Craigslist. At this point, if you've heard of Craigslist, it's just a fairly retro-looking series of websites to give you local listings from just about everywhere and for just about everything. At the time, though, Craigslist was literally a list of employers and recruiters in the Bay Area. I sent my resume to all of them, even though I didn't live in the Bay Area. I did the same thing in Tucson, where I live, although finding recruiters and companies was more of a challenge because there was no easily available listings and it was a much smaller tech market. I kept looking for different ways to get in. I got a couple nibbles over the next year, but not a lot, and I spent most of my time doing temporary office work and other random things to keep afloat. Eventually, I got an interview at a company called Wesson, Taylor, Wells & Associates, which I'll call WTW moving forward. This was a consulting company. What they did was hire you as an employee with benefits. You worked for them, but they would send you to work at companies needing your services. They had gotten my information as one of the hundreds of recruiters I mailed my resume to. Where they wanted me to go was local, so they weren't trying to send me someplace new. But it was a company where they already had several programmers working as consultants, and now they needed a technical writer with some programming background. I had a background in Fortran, a little bit of BASIC, and I knew a little bit of what they were working off of, which was a language called COBOL that was popular with businesses at the time. I was no programmer and really didn't want to be, but I was able to read code and figure out what it did. This matched with what they needed, which was someone who could document based off of code. I interviewed with one of the main people at WTW, the titular Wells. Then I interviewed with the main programmer for the project, who was also working for WTW. I don't remember interviewing with anyone from the actual company, a medical insurer called Health Partners that eventually got swallowed up by United Healthcare a few years later. At the same time as this, I was also interviewing for a different job as an online content creator for the local newspaper. I got offered both jobs and literally tried to take both because I was broke, but the WTW people knew about the competition from the newspaper, and they wanted me to just work for them, so they actually gave me a secondary job creating content for their website. That was about a 10-week project that I did on the side while I was working as a consultant for Health Partners. I went from about a year and a half of being broke to suddenly making money left and right. It wasn't high paying compared to some of the other things that you can do, but it was more money than I had ever been paid before. The contract lasted a year. I learned a lot on that job because I really didn't know what I was doing when I got there. I did the whole fake it till you make it routine, and I wrote about 500 pages of documentation for the programs they used to run reports for their medical billing. I also wrote internal documentation, helping the programmers quickly reference what code went with what product, and what each of the 200 or so programs did. I think this was more useful than any of the other writing I did because I'm not sure anyone ever really read the guides that I wrote. There wasn't a lot of buy-in from the company, and they almost never asked me how my project was going. But the programmers, both contract and permanent, appreciated what I could do for them. I was there for a year contract, and I left at the end of that contract. I would have liked to have stayed on, but they kept flipping management, something that became a running theme in my career. By the time I even got an interview to work for them permanently, it was someone who had no real interest and no background in what I did, so it went nowhere. That was the end of my first gig as a technical writer. WTW sent me out on a couple interviews as a consultant, but nothing caught on. Luckily, I landed a gig at Motorola up in Phoenix. That was a weird gig that I'll talk about another time. From Motorola, I went on to IBM, Intuit, Intel, and then a string of companies that managed payments and billing in ways that were similar to Health Partners. Now I'm at Quicken, where I've spent the past 4 years and hope to stay for the rest of my career. If you want some takeaways from my experience, it would be the following. 1. Be persistent. It took me a year and a half to land my first true technical writing job, but once I did, it became my long-term career. I sent out a lot of resumes, and one of them landed in the right hands. Applying for jobs isn't the same now, but being persistent is still important. 2. Build a portfolio even if you don't have a lot of experience. Figure out ways to showcase your writing and put it where people can easily access it, either in a website or on a job site like LinkedIn. 3. Take any opportunity to learn. Did I do my best work in my career at Health Partners? No, but I soaked up all the information I could and got better. I'm always looking for learning opportunities wherever I work, and I'm still learning to this day. I took a training course in presentations just this morning. Please like, please subscribe, and please comment. Let me know if this was helpful to you and if you want to hear about some of my other jobs and experiences. I'll be happy to give more information if I think there's interest.